physical training, self-defense training, firearms training, situational awareness, and the warrior mindset. Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast. This is a podcast where we'll be talking about Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast. This is a podcast where we'll be talking about being ready. We'll also be speaking to victim survivors of physical encounters, how they dealt with the aftermath, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast with me, your host, John Riddle. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Crestwood Technology Group. CTG supplies the defense and aviation industries with critical parts and materials designed to keep fleets and systems operational, ready, and safe. Check out the Crestwood Technology Group at ctgnow.com. Is there any worry about Sims going through that?
No. This is now what'll happen is you may get some spray. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your eyes are going to be sitting way up here, but there's a chance a little spray will get through. But if you need to, you could put some tissue in front of it. And that's what a lot of people don't realize when we're designing these for to take a shot, but then take a punch and then still be able to breathe. That's the biggest hurdle, because even with, say that there's an $800 helmet out there. It's LBX, right. LBX helmet. $800 helmet. John Cato's the designer of that helmet. He made it for Dom. Yeah. So Dom said, hey, I'd like to have A, B, or C, this thing to fold up. But really, John Cato does that. He also sews up the high gear that LBT has for the U.S. But he knows that there's that memory. Well, when they built that helmet, there's two little holes to breathe through with some mesh like that. Mm-hmm. So as long as you're not breathing hard in 100 degrees in Fayetteville at the shoot house, you're fine. Yeah. But as soon as you start breathing hard and fighting in a role play, and somebody, gets you in the catcher's position and sits on your lungs after you've been fighting with all the equipment on, you suffocate. I travel around and I say, hey, whatever equipment you have, put it on, and you'll see where things excel and fall apart. Like the high gear and helmet, and then you have the Spartan helmet. They're the same helmet, you know what I mean? The guy who I think Spartan's made some nicer improvements than the high gear. Uh-huh. That was that's Tony Blauer's brother-in-law. They had a disconnect, and then he ended up going with the Spartan suit. But that helmet will shift around. I remember working with the air marshals. I elbowed a role player, and it crushed in on his face. And even fighting with it, before we had my suit 20 years ago, we would have high gear, or even some of the red men, and we'd put a different face shield on because we couldn't take the abuse. And now we've just evolved stuff. I can't, with the guys that I work with, I just can't, there's no need to mismatch stuff. You know what I mean? Yeah. Let's design it the way we need to be, and then have a mechanism to make the changes. Part of the problem in the U.S. too, with a lot of these companies, they don't want to make the changes that need to be done. Uh-huh. They ignore these changes and just find ways around it, But I've tried to hit it head on. A lot of people don't know that I went to graduate school for industrial design product development. So that's why you see me making changes and designing stuff, knives and bags and all these other things. And, I run my martial arts curriculum through that design process. So constantly filtering and restreaming,
Yeah. Okay. Very cool.
But it'll be this helmet though. It's, we added better protection on the ears, because a lot of guys, whenever you got punched in the side or anything hits you there, padding all around the side, around the back.
That looks good. I just
Velcro to it here. So for accidental headbutts, even though that mesh metal right there could cut the rim of your eye, I want to take the abrasion out so you could add this to it for a little bit better protection as well, for clinch work and stuff. But, the more protection you have on your head, the bigger it gets. And then there's only so much clinch work you can do. And then you got to go back to your MMA headgear for whatever you're your task is, you know. So there is no perfect helmet, you know.
Yeah,
but I think for what we do, this is going to be the best, and it's going to be at a reasonable price.
Okay.
For people,
Very cool.
It should be out, you know, like I said, in December.
Okay.
So I'm and haven't been really doing any marketing for my suits, but we're selling a lot of them inside of the guys that we work with, and then once they end up using our suit, there's no going back to the other stuff. You know.
Sure.
So that works out pretty well. You know, I don't know if you remember the chest piece has the face recognition on the front, so your use of force can adjust. So that's good for now. Hidden compartments for knives, and underneath it here, we would have it, but I'd want it to be hid. So when we do scenarios gone bad, they'll do a visual frisk on the role player, right? But if they see any weapons on them, they're going to treat them different. So now I can have a foam knife, nook knife come out of thin air, just underneath their padded suit, and then it's in play. And then attaching stuff to the base of the back. You may snap somebody down doing CQB and see that they're armed. Now you just can't bypass that guy. You got to stop. You have to deal with that and communicate with everybody else. So the suits really enhance the training that, assault teams get. And then even if you're dealing with low vis stuff, somebody could be armed and you recognize that they're armed, but it's a meeting where, so he's armed. Now you may have to move up and down that use of force a little bit quicker because you see he's got a knife in plain sight or a gun, on his side or in a pocket. And like, okay, how am I going to deal with this guy? Or maybe I'm going to take this guy out first, type deal.
That's great.
So that's
man.
where it all starts to blend together, And you can talk about it, but you've got to put it in theater and just let it happen. Let it play out,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great info, man. Great info. For those of you that are listening to this podcast, I'm talking to Greg Thompson, and I'm going to give you some of his background because what we already started talking about is very interesting with his background as a designer, graphic designer. Industrial designer, okay, and he makes he made his own combatives gear after looking at many different styles that are out there. But let me give you a little background on Greg. After September 11th in 2001, Greg was one of the small group of civilians asked to work as a federal defensive tactics and air marshal hand-to-hand instructor in Artesia, New Mexico. Greg is the creator of the SOCP, which is an acronym for Special Operations Combatives Program, which became a program of record on March 23rd of 2010. SOCP was the first officially designated combatives program for all United States Army Special Operations Forces and is now the standard program for fighting in full combat body armor across all services and some federal agencies. Greg created SOCP instructors at Special Forces groups, the 1st Group, 3rd Group, 5th Group, 7th Group, and 10th Group. Army Rangers, Range 37, which is Advanced Skills Battalion, Air Force Pararescue, SEER, Marine Special Operations Command, MARSOC, Marine Force Recon, Navy Special Warfare, SEALs, and the Coast Guard Direct Action Teams, and many other special units. He also is currently training federal, state, and local law enforcement, such as the FBI, ATF, United States Marshal Service, Border Patrol, and several other key units within them. His background is that he's been training special operations units since 1998. In 2004, UFC legend Royce Gracie gave out his first black belts to Greg and 4 other students at Greg's mixed martial arts school, Team R.O.C. Greg has been training with Royce since the early 90s. Team R.O.C. is known for training some of the top no-holds-barred fighters on the East Coast. Tap Out Magazine has ranked Team R.O.C. the #1 MMA school in North Carolina. They have participated in many high-level competitions, some of which include Ultimate Fighter Championships, the UFC, The Ultimate Fighter, K1, HDnet, Rumble on the Rock, King of the Cage. Greg also is certified instructor crew in Muay Thai with black belts in other specific systems. Greg's other achievements are 2003 NAGA World Champion Advanced Division, Triangle Grappling, Guererros Gauntlet Superfight Championships, the 2000 Pan-Ams Silver Medalist, and Gracie National 200 to 210 pound champion. So Greg's been around the block a few times, and now he has the pleasure of working with our special operations guys as far as and high-end law enforcement people. And again, he has developed his own combative suit, so he's pretty much wrapped his hands around the whole organization there. So I want to welcome Greg to the show. Greg, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's been a while. I think we mentioned 2010 when I first met you up at Fort Bragg at the combative section, when I was up there with Redman. And that's when you were investigating the different suits that were out there. And, and I'm sure, because when I left there, I'm saying, to myself, this guy, his background, he's going to have his own suit. I knew you were going to do it. And it was just a matter of time, because of the special needs of the units that you teach, right? So I've worked in with Redman gear on and teaching, and I was teaching their classes for a long period of time, and it's got some good benefits to it. But for what you guys do, especially with these high-end special operations guys, you're going to need something you can fight, you can roll, and you can, like you said, you can with your suits, you can conceal things now, which is huge. Nobody else is doing that, right? Nobody else is doing that. I think that's fantastic. So a guy like you, as busy as you are with training and running your personal life, what is the first thing you do when you get up and you get out of bed in the morning? And what does your normal day look like?
I got a lot of crazy stuff running through my head when you say that. Well, normally I like my caffeine, so I've got to be my first thing is I'm up making I travel a lot. I like good coffee, so even when I travel, I don't like the hotel coffee. I've gotten kind of spoiled, so I travel with my own coffee. I travel with a press. I heat up my coffee in the morning. I press out my coffee. I don't want to wake up and run and be the guy trying to get to Starbucks before I got to get to class. I get up. Mm-hmm. Everything I have is structured to where I'm 53 years old. I know what I like. I know what I don't like.
Sure.
And I set myself up with things that I like around me. I'm financially comfortable where I can, get what I want. And I'm just going to do it that way. So I wake up, press out my coffee, and get cleaned up depending on what I'm doing, go teach. If I'm not teaching, I'm usually getting up, having my coffee, going through my emails, trying to stay caught up on some business that I have going on. My company runs, has a lot of military contracts. I've got, 3 large contracts in Fort Bragg that I've been, running and working with some since 98. And I've got 6 guys that work full time for me, and they all have, secret clearances. So I'm maintaining a whole bunch of stuff. So I have, to deal with, there's so many government side things that you have to deal with on that. I basically have, somebody asked me the other day and I thought about it. I have 5 basic pillars that I'm playing with. One, the government contracts that I have, right? So I talked about that, 6 guys. And I have my SOP instructor courses and other courses that I teach, right? That it's not opened up to civilians. It's just federal and state and military, and I have a 2-week instructor course. So the list of the units that I train that you mentioned earlier, those are all people that have sent people through my instructor course and have carried the knowledge back to those units, right, and are keeping updated with the SOP stuff. So that's a constant thing, because the guys in the military are usually only there for 2 or 3 years. They leave and then I have to train somebody else. Mm-hmm. And then every 2 years, they have to come back and AI or research to stay updated. If they're in a position to teach, I will let them AI for free, because it's not about me making money off of them. I've got to make sure that if you're teaching, you're staying up to date, because SOP is a breathing, growing program based on the overall census of the needs of that particular end user. And sometimes there's your core movements that we evolve, and then I may steer a little bit to the left or right if you're hostage rescue or whatever your mission may be, more low visibility. We may steer it a little bit that direction for the SOP courses, and then I do low vis courses and then custom courses as well. So that's another thing that keeps me traveling. I'm booked up now till the end of February because I can't be gone all the time. I travel 2 weeks out of the month max. And then I've got to be at least a week in Fort Bragg juggling that stuff. So that's 2 pillars. And I have my gym. So Team R.O.C Fayetteville, I have, over 230 students there, 7 to 8 black belts floating in there all the time, brown belts. Fayetteville's the highest concentration of soldiers in the world.
Right.
So the testosterone floating around is big, but everybody's a family there. You know what I mean? If somebody comes in and he's the tough guy trying to beat somebody up, I got a lot of tough guys. So you have to be nice to the white belts. And if you're a dick, you're going to get beat up by my black belts and probably want to leave. So it stays structured, but I have to show up there. Then I have my products. I have my impact suit that we were talking about with, face recognition on the front, hidden weapons in the back. So when you snap somebody down, it'll change the way the unit flows through there based on finding weapons on somebody who's not even fighting you. And this is lessons learned by us creating scenarios and trying to take them to the next level. So my combat cubes, combat cubes are like giant Legos that you fight around, and you can create any environment. Years ago, the units that I'm with had unlimited funding. We could buy whatever furniture we wanted to fight with, but it was flimsy. A bed could only be a bed. A couch was only a couch. A table was a table. And it was a hazard because even if you fell on some of the flimsy stuff, it would disappear. So I said, hey, we just need blocks. So I just had somebody make us some blocks. And then that was in 2009. And then now it's a successful company for me, selling these blocks and teaching people how to create scenarios. And it's not that I woke up and go, hey, I want to design this cube and put foam and stuff around it. There was a necessity. When coming from a design background, if I see a need, and the need is big enough that it's worth my time to stop what I'm doing and research it and build it and find a source for it, then I've already ran it through its paces and know it's going to be somewhat of a success before I do it. The cubes are still one of the most neglected things out there. If you think about how much a cage and MMA changed fighting, right? If you look at the tactics that were done 20 years ago, people were trying to stay away from the cage. Now everybody's moving to the cage to get up and fight. And there's a whole nother art. Right. UFC, the only art that ever dealt with fighting against a flat object was the UFC, right? Because there wasn't a system like that. You had sumo where would drive somebody out of a circle, but pinning somebody and developing techniques from there. Well, now imagine this. Imagine now there's a cube and walls and cubes around you like furniture you have to fight around. It changes the whole dynamics of what you're doing and your strengths and weaknesses and how you're going to attack that person. And it makes it a lot easier if you know this. If you don't know how to fight around these objects, they can be used for you or against you. Right. And more often than not, you're just left up to whatever happens. It's just a toss up. But if you know where to stand and how to spin or redirect and pin people over objects or escape when you're driven over an object, it's a whole nother level. So products are there and have pads that go on the rifles. I've always, it's always funny when people go, hey, we do real world military combatives, right? And I say military, like, okay, tell me when a soldier's not going to have his rifle attached to him.
Exactly.
Very, very rare. It's a rarity. That means that he's either doing some low vis mission or he's not on a normal mission, right? And which we do courses for that. So when we do all of our techniques, the rifle needs to be attached to you. Now, if this rifle doesn't have pads over it, it'll fly up and hit you in the mouth. It'll damage your role players, damage your equipment. And we start getting tackled over the cubes with the rifle strapped to you. It needs to be padded. If not, then you're going to hurt your guys. If you start hurting your guys in combatives, your program will die. You will die as an instructor. So it's always baffled me when you say, hey, we do really, okay. And then you watch them train, and they're doing what I love to do, jiu-jitsu, MMA, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, when you get this much time to train a guy in a unit, you got to go straight to their answers. You know what I mean? And then reverse engineer it backwards to other foundational stuff, because in a sense, define foundational training. What is foundational? And we're used to saying, well, foundational training is your jiu-jitsu, your boxing, your wrestling. these other things because we learned it that way. And I still say that because people recognize that. But the truth of it is this: your foundational stuff is defined by the needs of the end user.
Right. Exactly.
What is your task? What are you trying to do? That becomes your first grade, you know? So whatever it takes for you to win the scenario that we're going to create based on what you may run into or have run into, those are your first grade. And then after that, then you can almost say for a soldier that jiu-jitsu and MMA can almost be looked at as advanced training because you're empty-handed. But there's also the side of saying, hey, look, if I'm going to teach proper spinning and redirecting, it's obviously easier to do it without all the equipment. So you pick the techniques from the foundational stuff that link to that first grade that you're creating for them. Do it slick, give credit to wrestling, jiu-jitsu, wherever it comes from, but now put your gear on and say, this is our first grade. This is your second grade.
Now, do you find that when you're going slick, okay, and you're down on the ground grappling, and then you have them put a kit on, do you as the instructor have to adjust things for them because of kit?
Yeah, and this is where experience as an instructor dealing with this helps, because I will teach certain techniques or add to a technique even when they're slick, because I'll say, hey, you know, you can side mount escape and bring your knee through this way, but when you put shoes on and boots on, it's going to get caught. So now you need to add the other foot and do this, so your shoe will slip through better.
There you go.
You shrimp. Well, you may shrimp and hit a wall. You still need to know how to shrimp. Okay, now you're going to have to shrimp up or over this object. So then it'll change. So what happens is when I give them and even do this, I'm programmed to even do this in my jiu-jitsu class. So if a guy shows up to my, 5:30 basic class and I happen to be in town that month teaching, when I teach basic jiu-jitsu in a gi, I will reference force multipliers, weapons, wall. I'm showing you this way it works perfect on the mat, but it also fills these gaps. So guess what? My guys, Team R.O.C, and under Royce Gracie net, whatever, I define what that white belt learns first. And if I see a linkage to a technique that will work in there, rolling with everybody slick, just imano, and it works when he's got a duty belt on or when he's fighting over other stuff, I will start with that first. Why? Because I work with soldiers all the time. That's what, after 9/11, when I went back to work with one of the units, I was in a mat room, all day. That was my job. Guys would come down and go, Greg, I want to do jiu-jitsu, or I'll set up certain classes during the day, and then I'm hanging out. Or Greg, go put on an impact suit. This is what we're going to create. Get a truck. Go to this sniper conduit. This is how you're going to be. And I was the bad guy. And by being a black belt in jiu-jitsu and done MMA and striking and being a bad guy, you see what it takes for them to beat you at the skill level that they're at. You know what I mean? Yeah. And you know what's going to translate. So when I have them for the very first time, I teach them with all these layers in mind in case they go that direction. But I still want them to be able to defend themselves when they just are rolling imano, you know what I mean, one-on-one, because some of those techniques you'll have them do all the reps for don't translate into that one-on-one as well, but they're better the other way. So you find the ones to start off with over time, and then you show modifications for it. And there's ways to do it and teach, even ways I teach my Kimura locks or Americanas. I'll talk about trapping the thumb and manipulating here, and then relating that to better control of the elbow. But if he has a knife in his hand, it's hard for him to pass it. I can manipulate it better now, and I can punch a knife into him from the Kimura lock. Wow. And he'll now want to unlock. He'll now want to let go of it. Why? Because I'm going to slowly bring it into his liver, his kidney, his spleen, whatever. And he's going to feel that knife sliding in his gut, and I'm going to tell him, let go of it. And I'll slide, and then he'll let go of it. I don't need to do a lot of fancy stuff. I'm going to control that limb or break his arm. Right. But it's going to come from different modifications that you'll see when you've been training long enough, where there are these links between the two. The problem of it is it's hard for somebody that just did MMA and jiu-jitsu, and I'm not that, and they could be way better practitioners than I am, to make that link to having 15, 20 years of creating scenarios and watching guys fight in full kit as a pack. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And try to link that together. And that's what's kind of helped the SOTP program grow so much, because I don't go in there and undermine what we call foundational training. I say, hey, look, when you leave me and get through this course, find a good MMA gym, find a good jiu-jitsu gym and train, but know how to do it in a way that's going to help you. Know that all your answers isn't there, but it's a training aid, just like going to an IPSC competition, right? Mm-hmm. Just because you're an IPSC world champion doesn't mean you should be kicking in that door. Right. You know, he may not know anything about tactics or room clearing. He's going to get killed, right? But you could train him. He understands how to work his weapon system at a high level. So now he just has to build a foundation for this, and then he could excel, you know? And that's the same thing. We try to burn it from both ends for the school side, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where I fall and have evolved into, because I just evolve into where I see problems, you know what I mean? Sure. And what I'm passionate about. What am I passionate about, and where is there problems? And I wanted to go that way. You know, early days of UFC, I wanted to thought about fighting. I thought about, man, I want to be that. I want to be a coach. I want to train fighters. Mm-hmm. And then 9/11, you know, came in, and I went to work with the air marshals. Some of the guys at the unit I was with won the contract to train the air marshals as the advisor. So I was brought in there. You know, when they brought me in, they brought in a bunch of different martial artists, and some were told to leave, and then some were told to stay. And then the second phase of that, actually Fletzy handpicked a bunch of guys. We showed up one day, and it was like, hey, they were picking a kickball team. We'll take this guy, and Greg. Everybody else can leave. And they made us federal defensive tactics instructors. Nice. And I wasn't even a federal agent. But by learning all this stuff and knowing, hey, you know what? People need to learn how to put on a pair of handcuffs. People need to know how to handle people that are not listening but not fighting. Because that's where the fight happens. Majority of the fights for law enforcement isn't always that guy throwing up his hands, because they have time enough to move to another force multiplier. It's when they go to lay hands on that guy and he's acting compliant, and then he goes what I call ape crazy. Yeah. Not just a tossing, but it's all out. Yep. And they're not trained for that. And then they're also not trained for the support element, which means that second officer needs to know how to come in and help, right? Right. Communication. So when we do my law enforcement course, I recognize that. And when we teach our cuffing and prisoner hand or control, it links to the fight. But a good 30% of what we teach is how does that support element help properly to not lose control of the guy. If he's reaching for a gun, if he's breaking contact, is he way more physical and more of an athlete than both of us? And how are you going to deal with that guy? How do you wear him out? Mm-hmm. You know, is it scooping up a leg for the wheelbarrow and just holding him? Don't let him do anything, because this tank will do this. After about 20, 30 seconds of fighting all out, he'll be this. Right. So you hold him, because if while he's going ape crazy, you try to better your position, you may lose him. So you just say, I'm just going to hold him here, rest for a second, control him, let him gas, and then take control of the situation. But these are lessons learned, you know. But I don't want to get off topic with where we're going. But there's so many layers to so many things that people don't know. So when you start teaching jiu-jitsu, I can't help but interject this stuff. Sometimes my guys are in the mat room, they're ready for a tournament. It could be an MMA fight. It could be, you know, I tell my guys, do judo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, whatever it is you want. But I'll show them to teach a class, and I start injecting this stuff in there, you know. Sure. Even when I do basic self-defense, you know, I did a course a while. This was, you know, when I ended up adding this into the lesson plan. It was, you know, Tim Kennedy was with me for 4.5 years when he was in Fort Bragg. So he would show up and train every night. Great guy to have around, you know, great role model for a lot of my younger guys too, to have in there, a great mindset. And he would be in there. And then Jason Palace is one of my great fighters. He runs First Special Forces stuff. But, you know, these are really top-notch fighters. And I'd go in there in first aid. In jiu-jitsu, I'd start with a self-defense technique or a takedown, because too much time was spent on the ground. And I did this basic collar grab. Like, hey, guy grabs your collar, you're here, and then you move to these other spots if it starts to happen. And then you could see half the class there. Now you got to remember, this is Fort Bragg, you know, a lot of tough guys, and all these tough guys. God, I hate it when Greg teaches this self-defense stuff. This gets on my nerves. I just want to do a cool technique. I just want to do a fighting technique. And I said, okay, why does Tim Kennedy or Jason Palacios need to know this collar grab? We know what? Well, he could do the collar grab and he could elbow him across the face. He could do this, and it all linked to them doing that and then beating the guy up. And I said, no, well, maybe, but that's not what I'm getting to. I said, imagine this. Imagine you're out and an old man or a drunk female comes up and grabs your shirt really tight. And all you ever trained was smash, smash, smash. And you can't break that old guy's grip. He's strong. He's got old man grip, right? Or that female, she's got you real tight. And now you're tussling, leaving yourself vulnerable because you may not thump him. And if you punch that old man or elbow him or hit that female, you know, you may win that battle, but you're probably going to go to jail. So here's a method to do that. But even if they do strike, then this is what you can link it to, this escalation of force. So I'm showing you this as escalation of force. But if you're that 100-pound female and this 200-pound guy grabs you, now you smash him across the face. You break it. You hit him with the elbow. You strike. You do whatever you need to do. This is for the tough guys so they don't go to jail. And then you can just see that whole mindset start to switch, you know. And even had a soldier that was traveling abroad, and he was there doing some surveillance stuff, and he went to a pharmacy to pick up some medicine for somebody that was sick in this country. And the guy was leaning across the counter cussing out the pharmacist, and he grabbed her by her shirt. And he walks in and he's like, man, you know, what should I enter? I don't want to draw any attention to myself. Sure. You know, I'm just, you know, I think there's an engineer or whatever. Right. But he felt like he needed to do something. So he kind of touched the guy on the back and kind of got between him and the counter and was telling the old guy to calm down. The old guy reaches up and grabs him by his shirt and starts to blade. He goes, I was afraid he was going to swing at me because then I was going to have to hurt this old man. I didn't want to join it. So he reached up and he grabs his wrist and twisted it and broke the guy halfway down on a knee where he almost went down. He let him go, and the old guy backed up and looked at him and then walked out. And he was like, cool. Yeah. You know, I got him off him. And then he looked up and he saw there's a camera up there. So he was like, oh shit. Yeah. So if all we ever did was teach combatives to where it's fighting for your life, DEFCON 9, you know what I mean? Right. You know, hey, there's a place for it. If you're training assaulters to come in hard, that's going to be our first grade. And you don't see a lot of wrist escapes in SOC-P, but you might see it in some of my low vis course, you know, depending on what's going on. I may say, hey, what is your end user running into? Okay, well, because I have feedback for 20 years from people doing some similar jobs of yours all over the world, you know, I know the stories. The stories you won't see out on social media. Right. You won't see the stories out in the news. I won't really go into detail with the stories. I'll leave it kind of glazed over like that. But those real world stories that we're getting feedback from all these instructors shape our training. And that guy that's told, go do some combative so you can defend yourself and feel good about yourself, doesn't know any of this stuff. Right. You know, somebody just sent him there. And so when I, you know, the reason why SOC-P isn't open up to the public is because the POI doesn't match what the public needs. It doesn't mean, and even for regular Army, you know, isn't because it's SOC-P so special. SOC-P is designed for special operations needs. It's not this magical stuff in there. You know what I mean? Yeah. It might be to some people, but that basic soldier that's a cook, you know, he doesn't know tactics so very well. He may know to go in and go right or go left, but when we go into real scenarios, it becomes a tactical equation where it's fighting and then tactics merging together. So if he doesn't understand that when he shows up to me, I can't give it to him. I'm not qualified to give anybody their tactics. Right. I can tell you a bunch of tactics, but everybody's going to be different from county to county, state to state. So all these things change. So that's why a lot of the SOC-P stuff isn't for civilians. Now, if I were to go do a civilian course, I would say, hey, this is me from SOC-P, but this course is something else. Right. You know what I mean? Sure. and then define it as such. And that's where it gets things, people get confused, I don't think a civilian, if they went through SOP, he would get a lot about the clinch work and some of the fighting for tools. But the other part would go really outside of, I want to say over their head, outside of their range of knowledge.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, and then was born the SOC-P dagger. Right.
Yes. Okay.
I've got two of them. And I just saw your video in the pool the other day.
Yeah. You like that?
Yeah. Actually, I ordered paracord.
Yeah. Well, and what I like to even use is I'll do I like Kevlar cord. You can buy Kevlar shoelaces.
Yes. That's what I got.
The Kevlar is I can saw through anything that's rubber. So what the Kevlar does too is when you saw through stuff, it gets it really hot, and the Kevlar doesn't melt it melts at a higher temperature than your plastic and a lot of stuff. So you can saw through stuff; it'll melt through stuff. So any flex cuffs or whatever you have, you could take that and create hoops. Even if you're cuffed behind your back, loop it through and then scissor it with your legs and saw through stuff. Yeah, if you're flexible enough, a lot of this stuff is great escape and evade, but are you flexible enough to do it? But it's still good to have if you have a choice. It really, 550 cord works good too, but I've been running that way for a while, and a lot of that's contributed to the sheath design, and that's where so many people over the years really want to change the sheath. And Greg, why have it sheathed up? Why don't you leave it sheathed here because you can grab it fast? And I go, no. And sometimes for years, I never really went into that much detail on it. I glazed over it. Why? Because I knew people, when they started realizing there'd be a lot more knockoffs. When the dagger, when I first designed it in 2009, it bounced around a lot. Believe it or not, I actually started years earlier. And I started seeing, when I worked with my students, I tell them, hey, whatever knife you carry, bring it to class, have a trainer or a knife like it, take the edge off, and we're going to fight to get to the knife in kit when you get trapped. And I had this high-speed student, smarter than me, more athletic than me. A lot of these guys are just phenomenal. I mean, you teach them something, they have it like that. And I remember the student looked at me because I'd say, hey, you're on your back. You need to create space. Get your knife out, stab them, push them off, get to your weapon system, shoot them, or get to your feet, whatever you need to deal with. Look for his support element that might be coming. You may stab him and shoot the other bad guy, the second bad guy coming, before you even get up or deal with that guy. And we would go through these drills all the time. Then one day the student looked at me. He had a traditional knife, had a handle like this, Kydex, and he goes, do I resheath it? Do I leave it in him? Do I throw it down? I need to get to my weapon system. And I was like, that's a problem. Sure. And I also noticed by running it through its paces that as role players, and they would role play with each other, they wouldn't necessarily try to be a dick role player, a turd role player, but you would see these huge handles, right, sticking up. Let me get a red one here. They would see these handles sticking up, and then everybody would just grab it, and then you could be stabbed with your own knife. Now you're carrying a knife on your kit that I can just Kydex. I just grab it, pull it, and I shank you with your own knife. What are you going to do there? He wrapped up your long gun, grabbed your knife, and start stabbing you.
Right.
Okay.
So how when you developed this, I'm sure there was a reason why. Okay, being in the special operations community, when you put this down on paper, the very first, how did it come about?
Well, this is what happened. I actually evolved this, and I was running through this design process. I left the body. I designed this thing. It was called a rail attached to the rail guard, right? And it was called I named it the rail tool. I actually had a 3D print made of it, and it was on the front, and you would peel it off, and you'd stab whether you could clear malfunctions, and it would sit on the front of the grip, and everybody saw it like that. Oh, Greg, that's cool. Yeah. That's cool. And I'm like, okay, I got a great idea. Spent $1,000 to have this 3D print of it. This was over 15, 17 years ago. And then when I had it, I asked one of the operators, I said, hey, so I know this from design. So I looked at them and go, okay, what would you pay for it? Okay. Would you put it on your rifle? And I was just checking the box and stuff because I thought for sure. And he looked at me and he goes, nah, I like it, but I wouldn't put it. Why would you put it on your rifle? I've got all my optics right there, And then I realized when we were testing it that when you start fighting, your hand bases when you get tackled over stuff. And now you're having to go back to this object. And I'm like, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? But in my mind, when it left that, it came back to the body, and I wasn't thinking about it as a knife. I was thinking about it as a tool.
Right.
And in doing that, I disregarded the thought process of what a sheath is. I disregarded what I knew of what a knife should be. I wanted to create something that you could hide and not see, but wasn't a locking mechanism to fail. Because some of the locking mechanisms that we've seen, a grain of sand can get in there and foul your own deployment, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't really want, and I wanted to keep it simple. So it would hide behind everything, fit in the center of your chest, right? Right where you're in between your plate carrier here. Mm-hmm. A lot of units now, you see them now, the students will show up like this. So wherever you get tackled, you can pin your handgun down, this is scooping out. Inside, outside, collar, tie up, touch the tonsils, stir the pop, push them off. Long gun comes back up, or handgun. So you can use it as a support platform or the shooting hand. So there's no disconnect between your use of force with your hands to getting to the knife, to getting to the gun. I tell them, use the steel to get to the lead. When we do our edge weapon stuff, it's not that I'm training to ambush you or duel you with a knife. Very few knife videos that I have are that way. This is all about creating space. Plus, with this, I'm not going to stop at the blade here. I can plunge it all the way through to the ring, corkscrew it, and bring it back out. So now it's 6.5 inch deep. Even if I go into the subclavian here, there's no bone for it to hit. Mm-hmm. And when I rotate it over like that, it opens that up, and it's a quick bleed out there too. So any of these movements are just that and getting back to your tools. So we integrated that into the SOC-P curriculum, because how I can't train you good enough for everybody. I'm not good enough for everybody. Who's grabbing me? Randy Couture, in his prime. Mm-hmm. Greg, do your SOC-P techniques. Good luck. You better stab him in the throat and shoot him quick, and hope there's not another one just like him coming. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because what we do is not a game. I'm not trying to game anything. Right. When you get friends die and friends that get hurt, you're like, okay, I don't really care what the answer is, but we need to find it. And the race is to the answer. It's not about fooling anybody. And if I find a better way, then I go that route. So the dagger became that. Now, when I first pushed this out, guys were like, this shape was not recognizable as a combative knife. In 2009, 2010, if you showed this, they're like, Greg, what are you doing with the throwing knife on your kit? What the perception of this with a ring and a skeletonized handle, you saw some karambits that were curved with a ring, but they still had a handle, and they're like, what are you doing with that? Oh, that's a gimmick. And all these competitors would say stuff that had competitive. I just ignored them, and I just did my class. You know why I ignored them? Because once they realize what this is doing, what are they going to do? They're going to start trying to copy it, which now there's so many knockoffs and so many combative knives that have the SOC-P, what they deem it now. And as I see in some of the writings, they say SOC-P, SOCP style dagger. Style is what they're starting to say. and I laugh. I say, okay, I'll take that. You know what I mean? Because at least you're giving credit. For me as the designer, I may not be making financial gain off of it, but I do like professional credit for that concept without people stealing it. I mean, it's made in China now. You can get knockoffs with my name on it. It's crazy. But it's somewhat flattering. The evolution of that, too. We have the Mini that's out now, has a leather back plate, which you can get the black plate if you're doing the low vis of that and digging you. The newer Mini that's coming out, this is sharpened on both sides. It's only sharpened on one side.
Okay. How long is that blade? How long is that blade?
That's a 2-inch blade.
Okay.
2 inch. I tell my wife that's really 4 inches. I'm just kidding. But the other knives that we have too is the folder, So we have larger blades here with the folder, and this was designed to be more low vis. So I had guys say, Greg, I love the dagger. I'm going to these meetings and stuff, but this is my primary weapon system. I may have time to pour with it, or they may end up having two knives. And so with this, as thin as 4.5 inch D2 steel, which D2 steel is used to cut other metals. I was given free reign with Benchmade. Okay. I could make a switchblade. I could have done whatever I wanted. I wanted lightweight, as thin as it could possibly be, right? And I wanted I wanted to be able to open it with my thumb because I didn't want to be where I'm doing a preemptive deployment behind my back or underneath my arm and go, hey, man, I don't want to fight,
Right.
And then you hear this click, you know what I mean? It's like, no, I want to be able to open this thing up. And this is some of the stuff we work with the air marshals, because back then we had the Spider code indoors in Delicas we were playing around with and fighting on aircraft. And even with that, I remember students saying, hey, Greg, where should I put the clip? Should I put the clip at the hinge point, or should I put it, tip, what we call, if the clip is here, it's called tip down. Here it's called tip up. Which are right or left side, and I looked at him and I thought, that's a good question. Let me think about it, because I like that. I like thinking about stuff. So I ran it through all the paces. And what I realized is if you have a longer blade and I have to reach in like this, I'm still not getting to the deployment very well, which that's not a big deal. You can choke up. The problem lies when you do a cross draw, support hand draw with a knife. If you have it tip up and you do the cross draw, you're now fumbling with it to move it to here to click it and then deploy it, right? It becomes hard. If you have it tip down, you doing appendix carry, you can reach over, roll it to either side and deploy it just as easy with either hand and not fumble and fight with the knife. Because I also saw this when I started running it through its paces with my students. I'd have them start in the half guard. The guy on bottom in the half guard he could hide his training knife anywhere he wanted to, and as a folder. And anytime during the fight, you can get to that knife. The person has to act accordingly. When you stab him, he's not going to stop, but he has to move and create space because the knife's out. And these guys have been opening up knives since they were, probably 10 or 11 years old with one hand. Every class, you'd see 2 or 3 of them skipping across the mat. And I would watch and see why. And you would see it during the deployment of having to reposition it in their hand and it getting bumped and knocked out. So the evolution of this, I wanted to have it adjusted at these points. Plus, this clip is short, so I can hide it behind my belt. So if I'm doing an appendix carry, I don't want it slipping and then sticking out underneath my belt with my shirt bloused over it. I want my belt strapped to hide, hide it, right? And then I can cross grab. Now, there's dimples on it too. So these dimples allow me have a reference point, because even when I stab here, I'm not relying on the guard to stop the knife. I teach what's called a palm press. So it's base of my thumb. So whatever hits at the palm is catching it here. So I leave a little bit of a meat there, so I don't have to rely on it. So even if I sharpen a stick on the ground or a piece of metal, I know how to stab somebody. Even if you hit bone, it's not messing you up. Right. And you may put your thumb around it, may not. But the dimples reference that. But also if I'm going to do a gravity feed, right, forward grip or reverse grip, it referenced the pivot point to where it's actually slick here and rough here, right? So you can move it and rotate it in your hand a lot quicker under stress and then change the position. Also has a carbide tip here for breaking glass. Make sure that if you are breaking glass, and guys in law enforcement will know if they broke glass before, there's a lot of things that said, oh, this is a glass breaker, but it's just metal. You can walk up to glass with a little piece of metal and hit it and it not break. Right. And I promise you'll be surprised how tough glass. But if it's a carbide tip, it's such a hard metal, you can just tap glass and it's going to shatter, right? So there's a carbide tip here, but I also can use this to hammer fist and a fist load. Since it's so thin, I can gain different leverage with that. So it became kind of my ultimate self-defense, blade to carry if you want a larger tool. So now, is that on your website? It's not on you got to go to Benchmade, but Benchmade is sold out of everything. They can't keep up with production. So Amazon, Smoky Mountain Knives, military, ADS could be a good place to go. Benchmade, if you go to them right now, they'll say it's on back order. So even sometimes I tell guys, hey, you might be better off going to Amazon. For the military units, if they need a large purchase, hit ADS probably is going to be your best bet, because Benchmade told ADS, hey, look, we're behind on this stuff. We'll sell you a bunch of them and you can store them and then resell it to the guys. I've been having to buy them in bulk. Like I've got 100 and some knives coming every so many months for my courses, because in my course I give out, depending on the course, I give the students knives and trainers as well. But I haven't placed myself, even though I sell equipment, placed myself in a position to actually sell my knives, which I'm probably going to have to. But really with Benchmade, they in another year or 6 months, they should have a lot of the production caught up to where you could call them direct. Right now, they've just exploded with all their knives. And then trying to keep up with this S2EP brand stuff has been really hard for them to do. But we do also have another knife coming out with them as well. It'll be a SHOT Show in January, and then it'll be for sale in March or April. It's a larger fixed blade designed to be more of a combative knife for the regular soldier. It's a 6.5-inch blade. And I really originally designed it to have a bayonet attachment to it as well. System, but it's not going to be rolled out yet. It'll be a year or so before that comes out, primarily because I'm waiting to see who wins the contract for the military. You know, the Army has a contract for new rifles. So the standard AR platform, they're going to change that a little bit. So it's going to have a rail system that runs all the way down it. And right now, the one that's probably going to win doesn't have a traditional bayonet attachment on it. It wasn't in the requirements for it, you know, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes down. So I've got a lot of changes for that, but the knife itself will look like a normal knife, and then it'll fix to something else. And for the guys to go, hey, what do you need a bayonet for? That's like so outdated, man. You know, hey, everything moves in a circle. Yeah. And when you start dealing with crowd control overseas as a military unit, and you start dealing with different stuff, having that bayonet on there is a whole nother thing. You start moving through caves and tunnels and things where you can't get a good through and through shot. You know, you're going to need another system. Is it going to be as relevant as it was in the past? Not utilized in the same way, but trust me, I've done my homework, and it's still needed. The Marine Corps never left. The big Army knows it. 2 years ago, that for 10 years they took bayonet training out. They added it back in 2 years ago. Because everybody's getting back to their old mission set, you know, with the way things have been winding down.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that might be more information than you needed. You know?
No. It's very interesting, and I think people need to know, you know, what you're doing, who you are, what you're doing out there. So, is there anything in the future where you may teach something to civilians?
Yeah, I mean, a part of me would like to do more like that. This is the way that I'm kind of sitting is, one, it has a lot to do with schedule. Right. Two, it has to do with, it can't be called S2EP in any way, but it could be Greg Thompson teaching this, and this is my background as a S2EP instructor. So I don't undermine that. But the hard thing of it is, and where I fall short, is certain techniques that I would want to teach them, I don't want to show it on YouTube. I would show it to a class, but there are certain methodologies that we figured out that it's part technique, part methodology that would work really well. And I want to give it to a lot of civilians in certain courses, but I don't want to lose the respect of the units that I have. And what a lot of people don't understand is there's a lot of guys, you know, showing stuff on Instagram, and they're showing great stuff. Some good, some bad. Some of it muddies the waters, but there's a lot of newer guys out there doing really good stuff. And I would tell some civilians, go train with that guy. He will get you there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Some other guys may not. You know, they may muddy the waters and confuse you. And for me, looking at it even if I look at it from a financial standpoint, it would hurt my government and military stuff if I'm out there too much. Gotcha. And now, granted, there's a lot of guys that have gotten their foot in the door at certain units by way of their social media and their marketing. But what they don't understand is this. They're usually the guy they bring in for 3 days or 2 days to see what he's got. And it's a team of maybe 10 guys there because one guy on the team wanted to bring him in and they funded it. It's not that whole unit. You know what I mean? Right. And then that guy leaves. You know, I've been vetting guys like that for 20 years. I'm the guy. They go, Greg, we like this guy, go vet him. I would fly somewhere, train with a guy, and they wouldn't even know what unit I was with. I just showed up there. Now I don't do that, but I did that from 2003 to about 2008. traveling around and vetting guys to bring in to certain places, because, you need to know who you're bringing in and putting in front of guys, because you don't want to waste their time, and then when you do bring guys in, when they leave, you have to translate it to the student. It's not that you show that student and now they master. No, you have to be able to teach that back to the student. So when you have a subject matter expert there and they bring in outside instructors, you have to be able to integrate that. It's not that student's going to walk away with it in 2 days. He's got to review it, and then you have to vet it. You have to take whatever they give you and run it through the paces of what that guy's going to do. Not what grandma's going to do coming out of the 7-Eleven that works real good, which is good for her,
right?
But this guy and how he's going to do it. And then when it gets vetted, some of it works and some of it can be good techniques, but you don't have enough time to train it. Doesn't work with whatever they're doing. But that student that's an awesome operator, smart guy, doesn't have time enough to study all of these different attributes that are coming through. But I don't want to over talk it, you know what I mean? But for me, I've bounced back and forth with that, but I decided, hey, I'm going to just stay in my lane right now. And then I would do some stuff here or there, depending on what was going on. I have had some people ask me to do like an edge weapon course for the daggers. So just showing how the dagger would relate to concealed carry and set up some stuff there. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So that way I'm just doing it, making it more of an edge weapon defensive course, as opposed to me getting lured into teaching certain things that may not, be good to show,
Understand.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. It makes a lot of sense. That's perfect. All right, man. You gave us a lot of information today, and I appreciate you coming on. Usually at this point in time, I would say, Greg, tell me how, if people want to reach out to you for training, but the military knows where to get you. If they want to look at more information, it's SOCP.info if they want to come and check it out. And then I do have an Instagram where I just throw stuff up there, right.
SOCP_solution. So they can come and check it out and see what we're doing. The stuff I put up there may or may not help them, but it's and this is the other dilemma. I'm sort of playing with it because of my products and the things that I'm developing. I need to be a little bit more out there with my impact suits. So I try to market it that way. So there's a little bit of, hey, you know what? I need to get out there more for my products and my sponsorship with Benchmade, Vertex and stuff. But then there's this saying of, hey, am I going to do a course and open it up to all civilians? Probably not going to happen. Will I get on a podcast to show something that's, here or there? And I may throw up some stuff on my Instagram site, a technique that links to jiu-jitsu and some other stuff at some point. But it's just these open courses, which, it could be done. I would have to adjust it a certain way, but a lot of it's just scheduling as well.
Understandable. No,
and there's guys like you. I know you do a lot of teaching still too, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So there's guys like you and other guys out there that really have put together a good POI for the civilian. You know what I mean? Because it's solving their particular needs. I don't want people to think just because it's special operations that they're going to get something super magical. It's special because it links to that community's needs more so than anybody else's needs.
That makes sense.
And there is a lot of bleed over for them, but it's a different POI.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. That makes sense. Yeah, for their mission. All right, man. And where I picked up, we were talking about the dagger. And the cord, the Kevlar cord, was on your Instagram.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
And I was looking at it, and I said, "Geez, that's genius right there." For when you're just standing there in board shorts, because down here in Florida, everybody's in shorts. And if you carry concealed, you're printing. So that's another option. It's a perfect option.
Even though with all my martial arts background, I always have a force multiplier on me, usually a knife, but
Absolutely.
I don't want people to see my knife. I'm not the guy that's going to walk around with all this stuff exposed, because they're going to up their use of force based on that, or I would on them.
Absolutely.
Sometimes guys would show it because it's like, hey, I've got this gun and knife, so don't mess with me. And sometimes it works out good because people see and go, okay, maybe I won't get cocky with this dude because he's armed.
They just didn't meet the right person.
Flip side of, hey, if it does kick off, I have to protect this stuff. So if I grab a guy and I decide not to stab him in the throat right away, I may put him down and handle him. I want to be able to get to it real quick, but I don't want him grabbing it or his buddy coming up grabbing it.
Right.
You know, when I went to Costa Rica with my family for 2 weeks, I traveled everywhere with the dagger underneath there. And that's where I really started playing with that more and more and realizing that's one thing that this knife will do that none of them will do. And even when we were swimming around, I'm like, man, if a shark gets on my kid or something, I can get over there. I'm gonna just freaking stick them. Or even in Florida, you got your gators. You know what I mean? You get a freaking gator latch on your leg. You freaking stick that right through his skull. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can have it and nobody see it. And if you carry it right at the crease of the hips, it's not digging into anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
And if it is digging because you kind of swing to the side, you want to carry your knife, you got the mini there that may not, bother you as much too. So, but you got to practice. Is that way I like to hook it with the thumb and bring it halfway out. Then I'm here. And the cord, when it pulls it out, will clear the sheath past the waistline anyway.
Right.
So you want it to ride up and get caught here where it's clearing out. And now it's presented outside above the waistline when you deploy it. So then you can resheath it quicker with one hand, that way as well. So, but a lot of what people don't realize too, when you're carrying all these cool equipment, is how important your sheath, your belt, how it attaches to your body based on your deployment. You know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely.
You can have all this stuff, but if you can't get to it when you need it, it's not going to help you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people don't see them in that situation of when they're really going to need it. They're going to be probably behind the curveball.
Oh, sure they are. Sure. Yeah, we've seen it here in some of our simulation training. The way people carry their firearms, or the way they would carry a blade. We put a trainer on there and we get them on the mat, or we put them in a situation, and it's cool when you're walking around, you're thinking you got it, right? But then when it hits the fan, man, you better have trained it and got the reps in and getting it out, and knowing that where it is going to be the place where you're going to be able to access it the best.
Absolutely. And, it's great that you run scenarios. Scenarios are time consuming and hard to put together, but there's no better training than the task itself. Right. And people have all these ideas, but once they go to the scenario, they'll realize how their mind, their mindset, how they reacted, and they'll be more prepared, and they'll make the mistakes there as opposed to when it really matters. Yep. So that's one thing, even for my SOP courses, even the level 1, you have to go through a full day of scenarios.
Perfect.
And we have stuff that we run through these guys, because I can have the guy this is where you hear the term, I don't want the best guy, I want the right guy. And I used to hear that from some of these, from this one particular unit. And I'm like, what does that mean? The best? I don't want the best guy, I want the right. Well, wouldn't the best guy be the right guy? You started thinking about it. What they mean on paper, this guy's the best shot. He's the best athlete. He's the best fighter. Mm-hmm. He's the best at all these tasks that you can quantify on paper. Mm-hmm. But what you can't quantify is your decision-making process under stress, in the moment, and making these decisions. And that's where you get the right guy, you see?
Exactly.
Because he may not be the best at all these things, but he always ends up coming out ahead when you actually do the task. Why is that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's because you have to train that. And scenarios are the only thing to hone that and to bring that to bear it besides experience,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to have that experience. And so by you doing the scenarios, you're really helping those civilians out quite a bit. And even creating little slices of the whole thing, you know what I mean, can help too. We sometimes I'll have 30 guys in a class. I'm like, man, I only have a day. I want to run through as many scenarios. So we may do some that role play all the way out, and then we may do some to where I may end up putting something over their eyes and snatching it up, and it's right there in front of them. Deal with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Turn around again, cover it up, snatch it up, deal with that, and then you're recording it. You know what I mean? And then you're playing it back to them.
That's it.
Because one thing you'll know too, it's important to record it. Although we don't save a lot of our recordings because you don't want it used against the student, or you don't want it used against the civilian that may end up being an altercation later. It could be subpoenaed and then just spun wrong. So, but they will not know. And this is what I know from scenarios. You can take a guy, he's not meaning to lie, and he will look at you dead in the face. Greg, I did not do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah,
no, I did. And
here
his mind, he will put his hand on the Bible.
Yeah.
You can shoot me dead. I'm not lying. And he means it.
Sure.
And then when you see the look on his face, when you show the video to him of what he actually did, or how it went down, there's shock. He goes, man, I'm sorry. I really did. And then he's all depressed. You know, come up to you later, Greg, I wasn't trying to lie. I really didn't think. And I look at him and go, I know. That's why I record it. And that's why I didn't make a big deal about it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Or guys that I respect will say, Greg, it didn't happen that way. And I go, let's watch the video. And then I don't even argue with them. Yeah. Because I don't want to lose them. I don't want to make them feel bad. I go, okay.
Sure.
And I'll turn it where they can see it. And then I'm watching their face. And then you just see them go, oh, crap. So recording it, playing it back, analyzing yourself, analyzing the students. And you'll see a lot of common themes that pop up by doing that, you know.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
Those are little secrets. Don't share that. That's just between you and I. You know, we don't want any competitors to know that that's a big secret.
Yeah.
Not that they're not listening.
I know, right? All right, brother. I appreciate your time, man, and all the information you gave us today. And I'll be in touch. I'd like to have you. I'd like to have you on again, depending on your schedule, your time, so we can get a little deeper into a few other things that I want to hit with you.
With that, well, hey, thank you. And I don't normally get on these things, but I respect you and what you're doing for the civilians and how you handle yourself. So whatever you need, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Have a great weekend. All right.
You too.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.